Yeah, Kyros without a doubt is one of those leaders that typically gets lobbed to the trash bin of fucking useless leaders. Many have tried to fix it, solve it, or even try to break it, but to no avail. Nobody's ever succeeded in doing so. Until one day I decided, nah, fuck that, and give Kyros a genuine, Kaij's Lab effort to bring forth this most powerful strategy and deck list. And with that, Marines, I present to you the OP07 Kyros deck list. So to start things off, there's so many factors that go into a deck list. Obviously, you have to worry about the environment, otherwise known as the meta. What decks you'll be facing and have to watch out for typically will decide how your deck and strategy plays out. A good deck builder will always consider the meta and what decks are typically strong against or weak against each other to kind of determine where you fall into that ladder. So before I show the deck list, let's talk a lot about the in-depth scope of the meta and where Kyros fits into the mix. Now, of course, this is kind of just based on my playstyle, strategy, and deck list, so kind of bear with me. Firstly, let's list out all the possible decks that are relevant to a regionals event as of OP07 pre-ban list. You have yourselves Red Purple Law, Black Yellow Luffy, Lucci, Gecko, Nami, Dofi, Boa, Bonnie, Reiju, and Enel. Of course, there's like a small chance you might face decks such as like Yamato, Cat, maybe Red Purple Luffy, or anything else that could maybe squeeze in a small representation. But besides that, these 10 decks are what are very likely to be represented in a total matchup spread in the span of like 10 matches. Then right here is my most accurate win percentage against each of these 10 decks that are worth mentioning for a regionals event. We have Red Purple Law at 40%, Luffy at 50, Lucci at 50, Gecko at 60, Nami at 40, Dofi at 90, Boa at 90, Bonnie at 80, Reiju at 50, and Enel at 90. So as you can see here, Red Purple Law and technically Nami would be this deck's biggest op, essentially the decks you'd want to watch out for. Then the rest is either a 50-50 matchup or an insanely easy matchup. Believe it or not, this deck essentially kind of counters and beats out blue, green, and yellow consistently. But the only things kind of stopping this deck is another black deck that has border removal to contest my pressure, and or a Law itself that can do all three: rush, remove, and build wide. So overall, it has kind of somewhat of a solid matchup spread, although everything in a regionals event is based on luck and matchups anyway. So this deck, if given a matchup spread in the span of like 10 games, it does kind of have a chance to actually go X1 for the most part. Only way this deck can go undefeated is if its matchup spread is pretty diverse and I somehow beat out the 1 RP Law, also including all the 50-50 matchups as well. Otherwise, it stands a pretty good chance on its own, considering in a game of TCG, knowledge is power. So if you take that power away from them, they won't really know what my deck can do or how to play against it. And that's kind of a huge deal in a 1-game Swiss per round, especially when you've practiced against all the decks you expect and then you kind of just run into this rogue ass deck that's low-key kind of strong, where 1 or 2 mistakes and that's probably it. I mean, that's essentially what a rogue deck would typically feel like anyway. Now, of course, if you look at all these decks, the decks with high representation is more than likely Lucci, probably at least RP Law, probably Luffy, whereas like the rest is pretty much diverse for the most part. I think this meta in the specific regionals in Dallas is going to be a bit more diverse than Peoria, potentially because of how many people might play different decks or drop Law simply because of the ban list. It's honestly kind of hard to predict what the ratio of the decks will be, but there's only so much you can do to your deck to make it winnable against all your bad matchups while keeping your good matchups intact. But now that you guys have an idea of what decks are going to be played and somewhat of an idea of how many of these you'll expect to see in the event, I can then present to you guys the deck list itself, go into detail on what, why, and how to react to certain matchups. First, we have 4 of the 4 cost Laboon. You guys should know this kind of by now. This card is like a staple for a reason. It's the main engine of the deck, one of the best cards to play on 4 Dawn play. It's got a 1k counter. It's an infinite -4 if it just sticks on board. The fact that it even gives you an instant -4 is huge when it comes to removing your opponent's board using Kyros' leader ability too. Otherwise, this guy, if you're going value Kyros, which is my build, you gotta run this guy. This guy's gas. Then we have 4 of the 4 cost Kuzans. This guy's another staple of the deck as well. Not only does this guy give you a +1, but it also offers that -4 similar to Laboon. Those 2 guys on the board are pretty scary since that's like a total of 8 cost reduction if used together. This allows Kyros to KO anything of an 8 cost or below essentially. Other than that, Kuzan does help the deck solve its issue of lacking in draw power. Summoning this card raw or using Rebecca to bring it back, or Gecko to bring it back, that +1 really helps Kyros have somewhat of a decent hand size through your match. You could potentially bring it down to a 3, but I just see myself always wanting to play this or Laboon on 4 Dawn play, so I personally keep it at 4 for consistency in the early game. And it's also pretty good against RP Law, since if you're going to summon something that gets bottom decked anyway, might as well summon something that gives you a +1, right? I feel like that's actually one of the reasons why I do probably still run it at 4. Then we have 2 of the 4 cost Hosi blocker. This card is pretty cool actually, since it's like a 1k counter with the block ability that when summoned, it actually gives one of your opponents a -4. So it's kind of like a fusion of Rebecca and Hina into one. I like this card a lot since it does offer that option of -4 while blocking to help play offense and kind of defense at the same time. Although Red Purple Law pretty much just eats up all the fucking 0 attack blockers in my deck, I'm kind of almost confident that there might not be as many RP Laws, I think. So yeah, that's why I'm going to be using this card as a tech choice to help with other matchups and just overall -4 consistency. Red Purple Law typically typically will bottom deck your black card, so Rebecca might not always get full value from the grave, and we're able to summon Hina. So even against RP Law, I think sure Hosi can definitely bring out that -4 instantly when needed to kind of keep up. Honestly, this card's kind of like a give or take. It's a little bit weak against RP Law, but pretty strong against everything else if you want to wall up. Then we have 2 of the 4 cost Rebecca. This card is pretty damn good overall, so much so it's a staple in most black decks. However, since my list is very tight and I haven't seen Rebecca do that much in my build, it's pretty much felt like either you run a bit more black cards and put Rebecca and Hina up to 4 each with maybe a Brook to summon from hand, like, you know, the 3 cost shitter, or you just kind of reduce the ratios and throw something else instead. So therefore, I kind of just ended up only needing just 2 of the Rebeccas, and it's just been fine from my experiences. It's a setup blocker while grabbing back a key card, a 2k counter, potentially summon out a Hina. It'll kind of just do its job when it's needed, but it's definitely not 100% needed in most of my games, it seems. So 2 is just fine. I mean, I think a big thing to keep in mind is that in a dual color leader that runs half of one color and half another color makes it kind of tricky for Rebecca to add things from the grave. If you check my deck list, there isn't that many things she can add typically compared to like a full black Gecko or Lucci deck. Yeah, I mean, even Sakazuki only ran a few blue cards and the rest is completely like 80-90% black. So Rebecca, in my opinion, is one of those cards that the more black cards you have that is recyclable, the better you can run 4 Rebeccas. Otherwise, you'll look at your trash and see no targets and Rebecca's effectively useless. So yeah, if you plan to run 4, look, run it with caution. No, there isn't many targets or chances for you to have set up in the grave. I would just trust me on the 2-to-3 ratio, unless you really want to change the entire build and make it like 80-90% black. And at that point, you might as well just play fucking Lucio Moria. Then we have 2 of the 3 cost Hina. This card does exactly the same job as the previous -4 options. It's a 5k body with a -4 cost on play. It's summonable from Rebecca or just raw summon for the instant -4 and KO synergy. It never really hurts to add a variety of -4 in the deck since you want to consistently kill 4 drops or stack your -4 and reach up to an 8 drop. But Hina is definitely like a solid card to have in my opinion. It's practically a staple amongst all Kyros builds, so even in this one, I'll still run it. But maybe just as like 2 since I already have so many forms of -4 as it is. Then we have 3 of the 5 cost Sabos. This card is one of the best blockers in the goddamn game, at least for black blockers actually. And the main goal of this card is not only to play defense and have a built-in anti-KO against other decks that can also KO as well, but can actually help you cycle through your bricks and dig into your deck. It not only sets up your trash pile for Gecko, but definitely helps you make your hand feel a lot cleaner. There's not much to say besides the deck list is pretty tight that I couldn't manage to squeeze a 4th one in, but 3 at least with Rebecca to bring it back once, or it definitely helps to see your Sabos put in a lot of work each of your matches. You can definitely be sometimes the MVP against black decks, so I mean, I'd say this card alone, if used correctly, can make your deck feel a lot stronger at times. Definitely a staple black card in general. And we have 2 of the 5 cost Hosi. Yep, this deck is a black and yellow leader, which means this deck is going to feel somewhat reminiscent of a typical black removal deck meets like an L yellow. It has the trigger in high drop yellow. I won't even say it's got like what? 2 different cards I can trigger, but anyway, it has that as an option if it comes up, and it does have the high drops, but it also has like the mid-range cost reduction in KO black. So this deck has a really cool interaction with Gecko using Hiyori from grave and instantly using that to just shove Shirahoshi into life for the guaranteed trigger. That's actually something I do pretty often. Anytime you have a face-up life, you just 8-drop Gecko, get your 4 drop of your choice, and your 2 drop is going to be your Hiyori. Hiyori is going to take your face-up life, and then from hand you put that Shirahoshi into life, so you can guarantee that trigger, which is pretty good. So with 3 Sabo and 2 Shirahoshi, this deck has a lot more breathing room to see what it needs and cycle out what it doesn't need. But worst case scenario, you can potentially raw summon this card or use it as a 1k counter. Either way, it's a fucking brilliant strategy when pulled off and puts this deck at an insanely competitive standpoint in certain matchups. Then we have 3 of the 2 cost Viola. This card is an MVP and honestly feels like it was designed just for Kyros. I almost actually wanted to put this bitch at 4, but there's been plenty of times where this card just bricks up for me. So I've always just kind of stuck to 3 only, and if I ever needed more, like Gecko could just always summon this card from the grave to use its effect again. So the 3 ratio makes a lot of sense and has worked for me, but it's also an amazing card that lets you manipulate my opponent's life however way I want, which is huge against yellow or any other decks that might need a key card from life, or I can just simply put my face up life face down so Kyros can keep using his ability. Either way, this card being a blocker on top of all that makes it such an insane tech for this card. Then we have 2 of the 2 cost Sanji. I actually really like this card a lot. Like, it's a personal favorite, I'm not gonna lie, and it saved me so many times against a lot of decks out there. People actually forget that if you have no life and you swing with Sanji, it will still give you that 1 extra life from deck, even if you don't draw anything from life. But besides that cool interaction, this card itself is another way for you to take a face up life, put a brand new 1 face down from your deck, so that essentially, if not just a 2k counter, is like a funny little +1. Unfortunately, since removal decks will always pretty much just KO this card quickly, and there's like 2 matchups where I never swing. More than half of my matches, this card only really sees play against just blue and green really, which ends up being a card that is just right for like a 2-up in my opinion. Otherwise, not a bad choice to summon from Gecko since they have to swing into it, otherwise I'll just gain a +1 advantage. But worst case, it's a 2k counter. But if you're able to summon it in the right matchups, you're able to KO something and then take your face up life, replace it, get a +1, and you got a face down so you can use it. Like if you find yourself in that nice situation against blue and green where you can comfortably use Sanji, it's a really nice card. Then we got 4 of the 2 cost Hiyori. Once again, this card is another life manipulator, which is usually best used as a 2k counter, to which then Gecko can bring it back to take a face up life and put something from your hand face down. If you're able to do Gecko into Hiyori and use Hiyori to put Hosi into life, you've pretty much gained an insane amount of plus advantage. That interaction alone is pretty cool, and it's the main reason this bitch is at least a 4 of. Other than that, sometimes I might summon this card raw if I really need to, but nah, this 2k counter is pretty goated for Kyros and definitely should be a staple card. Then we have 2 of the 4 cost Perona. This card, other than being a 2k counter that can be recycled into your hand thanks to Rebecca, actually has the spice option of either -3 if you really need it, or to rip 1 card from your opponent's hand, which I think this tech choice does a lot for the deck and is surprisingly doing a lot of work that I reasonably can't take it out. It's definitely doing a lot more than T-Bone was doing, so I've decided to opt out for a double Perona 2k counter as my spicy tech. But yeah, if you find yourself in a matchup where you can do the hand rip, either hard summon or you summon it from Gecko, it would surprisingly actually, it would do some work. Then we have 3 of the 1 cost Ice Age. It's so damn good that I almost put it at 4 so many times, but oftentimes it can be a brick too. Yeah, to be honest, I think 3 feels pretty comfy, and I don't think I've bricked with the card because of the 3 ratio. The fact that you can Ice Age a 5 cost character and let Kyros KO for free is an insane interaction, not gonna lie. And honestly helps me to stay in the game against a lot of the 5-drop mid-range decks out there. Other than that, it obviously helps me to reach like 9 and 10 drop cards to KO, so it's always going to be a very strong toolkit. Then we have 2 of the 2 costs of Buzzcut Mochi. Now I know I used to run this bitch at 3, and I still run this card of course, but I dropped it down to 2 since I was still debating whether or not RP Law was going to be as much it was from the previous regionals. I've kind of just decided to keep at least 2 in the hopes that if it's needed for matchups like RP Law or maybe Dofi or Lucci, that will kind of come up, but otherwise it's definitely a card that can be dead against a lot of matchups. So it's useless against all Luffys because they either take their own life or already start at fucking 3 life. So this card coming into play is pretty hard there. It's almost hard against NL since all they need to do is flaunt pay and I'll probably never get to less life than them. In fact, Buzzcut Mochi can't work if both players are at the same life too. So the fact that this card only works when you have less life can make it kind of tricky for a few decks. But otherwise, I mean, this card of course is amazing when played against RP and Dofi. Those decks typically like to spam and go wide like 80% of their gameplay. That Kyros KO teamed up with a Buzzcut Mochi KO allows me to double KO in 1 turn to pretty much stay in the game and have their wide build under control. Otherwise, it's a pretty cool tech choice that can pair up with the -4 or 5 to kill at least like a 8 drop or 9 drop. It's definitely a nice card and fits Kyros enough to still stay in my current build. Then we got 3 of the 0 cost spell. This card has the same logic as the NL build. Pretty much you have a lot of dead cards and or high drops that the 0 cost spell will more than gladly eat them up for you, and you could just defend out like a 7k swing or whatever defense you need. In fact, it does have a chance to be the last life as well, or if you have 1 life exactly, you can always Gecko your Hiyori and shove that 0 cost spell into life for good measure. It's a nasty card that definitely gives my Kyros build a much needed defense that without it my deck would be pretty weak against aggro, so this card has to pretty much be here for the defensive measure. Then we have 3 of the 8 drop Gecko. Gecko just kind of serves as a setup for the bigger bosses in the deck, but nevertheless, this card is one of the most broken black cards in the game, so you definitely need to run at least 3 or max it out to 4. I mean, look, this card can pretty much bring out your blockers, your -4 cost reductions, and pair it up with your 2 cost targets for knife manipulation. It's got some decent shit to summon, although not Helmeppo Lucci. It still does what the deck wants, and that's what keeps Gecko in this deck. And the funny thing, you know, to pull off but extremely strong if done right, is you 8 drop Gecko. I know I said this a million times, but this shit will never not amaze me. It's probably one of the funnest things I can do in this deck. You 8 drop Gecko, and then you summon Hiyori, and use Hiyori to pretty much just take a face up life, and once again put the share Hoshi from your hand and put it into life. Once again, it's a pretty nice combo. I'll never not stop talking about it because it's just every time I pull it off, like I just, god damn it, I fucking cream. Other than that, Gecko is just that strong. Then we have 3 of the 9 drop Yamato. This card does it all. It's a 9k body that KOs a character based on life, and if 1 life or less, it gives you an extra life. The scariest thing about this card is the fact that it can pair up with either an Ice Sage or it pairs up with a 10 drop Kuzan. So once the board is -5, Yamato can combine both life and the -5 and essentially kill an 8 drop all the way up to like a 10 drop. And if you find yourself dropping these motherfuckers back to back for KO value and life value, it gets pretty fucking scary. But other than that, it's a staple high drop and needs to be ran at least 3 of them for the most part. Then we have the 1 of 10 drop Ace. This card adds that spice of variety to the Yamato ratio. There are times where I do need a rush swing, or maybe I have like 2 or more life. And I've just decided not only to drop a big body, but also gain a life for the sustain. So not always can I always use Yamato at the perfect time. Ace kind of becomes like a nice switch up that offers something new to the deck that can honestly help close out games or clear board, but is a pretty nice card overall and is only needed at 1, maybe 2 at max. Then we have a spicy tech, 2 of the 8 drop category. This card specifically is for anti-Moria, and no, not the leader, the motherfucking 8 drop itself. Honestly, is extremely good against Black Lola Luffy, and definitely pretty good against any black deck that can drop a Moria. So this card alone gives me an answer to something that, you know, can be a problem and most likely end up costing me the game that otherwise 8 drop cat might be able to bail me out of. And it just so happens I might be able to cap my own Hosi too. So another typical yellow combo, but other than that, this card definitely comes in clutch for these specific matchups. Then finally, the big boss of the deck, 3 of the 10 drop Kuzan. This deck is centered and built around this big ass boss. This card not only gives you a -5 AoE every turn, but it can KO a 5 drop on summon, to which then you can use Kyros later ability to KO another 5 drop or below also. So that double KO potentially is pretty strong, and if paired up with the rest of the deck, it basically upgrades the deck's strength and board control by double, in my opinion at least. It's a winning key card and definitely wins me a lot of my matchups. You have to run 3 to 4 if you want to continue beating your easy matchups, but also to put a lot of pressure on the 50-50 matchups too. The paired with Yamato is so damn strong, and it's a hard body to get rid of, both by attack and cost. Blue and yellow have to spam Raigo and Red Rock, to which you pretty much just use your Sabo and Hosi to find as many 10 drops as you can, so that if they remove it, you just summon it again, and it becomes a game of chicken to see how many high drops they can remove. But besides that, it's an amazing card to summon at 10 on. The game feels so much smoother and easier once this guy is out, so definitely the main boss monster that gives this deck the majority of its pressure in the late game. I'd say the main reason I used to run 4 but dropped it down to 3s because of Black Lola Luffy and a little bit of Lucci Moria. Those decks have a tendency to spam fucking 8 drop Gecko and sometimes drop the Sabo. In those situations, it feels like using 8 drop Cat in response to Gecko is one of the best moves this deck can do. That otherwise the only other thing that I could do is probably a 8 drop Gecko and then do a -4 and then last 2 Dawn. I don't know, just use Buzzcut Mochi to kill Gecko. Otherwise, against Black Lola Luffy, 10 drop Kuzan can't do too much besides be a big 10k body. 8 drop Cat can at least get rid of their Moria and clog up their combos so they can't loop next time. Otherwise, if it weren't for Black Lola Luffy, I'd probably bring this guy back to 4 total. But then again, there's also Lucci and Moria where they also spam 8 drop Gecko. So it feels like, yeah, for the black matchup, yeah, Cat's probably the call. Cat is not doing much against any other matchup. It's just strictly I hate Moria card. So it'll get his job done if I see it and hopefully help me a lot when I need it. So that right there is the finalized OP07 build for Kyros. There's just one card that I really wanted to squeeze in, but I just couldn't due to the deck list being so damn tight. So 8 drop Sabo. This card is a monster when paired up with the cost reduction of the deck and even 10 drop Kuzan. But sadly, I couldn't find anywhere else I could cut to make this guy fit in. And even when this dude was in my build, usually just like one of, it was only putting in work in some games, but not consistently. So you might have to go out of your way to maybe run 2, but it would be tricky otherwise while making your build too bricky. But I really love that card. I think it's great. It's powerful. You can do crazy combos. Like if you have 10 drop established, you can Kyros KO a 5 cost. You can then use 2 Dawn for Buzzcut Mochi, KO a 9 drop. And then you could, I don't know, Sabo summon for the last 8 Dawn and just kill a 10 drop and kill another 8 drop. I mean, like, yeah, the quadruple KO with this card and Buzzcut Mochi 10 drop, it's amazing. But man, there really has to be a slight meta change and like, I don't know, maybe less black, less Sabo for I think Sabo to see play. Otherwise, yeah, the anti-KO is definitely huge and it already stops Kuzan. It's gonna be hard for me to squeeze 8 drop in, but yeah, RIP, this card's amazing. Other cards that are definitely honorable mention and can be thrown in for certain matchups would be 3 cost Brook, 6 cost Brook, and an 8 drop Isho. These are all actually pretty good cards for Kyros. 3 cost Brook being able to kill a 5 cost if you pair with the -4. 6 drop Brook gives you a chance to fight the non-KOable cards like Luffy's Sabo or even like a Barcelino. And Isho is just great against decks like Nami, Bonnie, Luffy, and even Dofi. But again, it's pretty hard to squeeze in these fuckers when the list is already at its tightest. Try to make the deck as solid and grounded as possible by making it do the main strategy that it was designed to do throughout all matchups instead of trying to counter build to just like 1 or 2. Because I truly feel like these matches at regionals are probably going to be pretty diverse. And because of that, I got to make sure my deck can kind of cover what it can and at least keep the 50-50s at 50-50. So there's, you know, still a chance there. At least that's my logic. But yeah, a lot of cards to consider and shit I've tested in the past. But this is what I think is the most consistent for my strategy and playstyle, so I gotta stick with it. But of course, you guys are free to change up to certain playstyles or decks. If you fear RP Law and think it's gonna be the most played, definitely just drop 4 Buzzcut Mochis. Fuck it, just max it out. If you feel like there's a shit ton of let's say Black Lola Luffy, just go ahead and drop down more 8 drop Cats, 8 drop Isho, and 6 drop Brook, right? Like you could technically counter it if you want. If Blue G the main concern, you can easily run like 4 Geckos, bump up Rebecca and Hina and probably run cards like a 3-cost Brook. There's a lot you could do for Kyros if you want to do like a meta call or predict matchups. But I've honestly just kind of stuck with like an all-rounder that can mostly handle anything as best as it can. Other than that, of course, you guys know the deck needs to go second always. You have to build up to the 10 drop, play mid-range as best you can. I think as much as you guys would need for the deck list and info. I don't think you guys need a whole chart or spreadsheet on hands or other types of data that isn't really useful. Just go second, draw a nice hand that lets you, even curve into 10 on. Play smart. If you already know how to play against certain decks, then you should be able to pilot this one easily. I don't think the deck is that hard to play. I actually think the deck is a million times harder to fucking build. But most meta decks are easy to build in comparison, are pretty textbook. But this one is pretty fucking tricky, not gonna lie. Other than that, yeah, like I would probably go into more depth about maybe combos and matchups and other stuff like that. But like, you know what? It's just part of me also doesn't want to do too much because I swear to fucking God, bro, one of y'all motherfuckers are gonna watch this shit and share it around, and then my whole secret, my whole strategy gets exposed, and I go to fucking regionals. Oh, I seen your video, and then I just get fucking countered, But anyway, I don't want to show too much. I want to show enough that the Kyros players will know what they're doing. Everybody else just can see the build, but they'll have to piece together what some of my combos will look like and play style strategy is. I don't want to give up all my secrets. Another main point of playing Kyros, just besides black yellow combination, and I just like the deck style, is that it's a rogue deck and no one knows what it does, how it plays, the build and all that. So I still want to relatively keep what I can mysterious and unknown as best I can, so that way I still have that to my advantage, because that's my main advantage going into 10-round Swiss, is that they don't know the deck, they don't know the strategy, my build, combos, what to look for. That I kind of need that. So yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that. So that's gonna wrap it up, my Marines. This is my OP07 Kyros list. I'll be taking to regionals and see how it goes from there. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, hey, let me know in the comments below. Wish me luck this weekend, and I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna catch you guys on the regionals video. Peace.